Have you ever wondered if being overweight or obese is a choice? Is it a moral failing? Is it just being plain lazy? Of course you have, and so have I. And today we're going to be diving into some of the latest research on obesity. And we're going to start to address and answer this question. Is obesity really a choice? Is it a failing of moral character? Is it something that is out of our control? Welcome back to the Legendary Life Podcast, my friends. I'm health expert Ted Ryce, and what I tell you this show is about, it's about breaking down science-based information on how to lose fat, prevent disease, and live a longer, healthier, legendary life. And if that sounds like what you're into, if you want to learn what I like to refer to as the best information, the best science-based information on the planet with regards to fat loss, you're in the right place. And I want you to hit that subscribe button wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you've been listening for a while and you know that we've been running a challenge, a coronavirus comeback challenge to help you get back in action after all the lockdowns, after all the staying inside and binge watching TV and eating all the food, eating all the rations for the entire month and 2 days. Go to legendarylifepodcast.com/challenge. That's legendarylifepodcast.com/challenge and join our free challenge. Now, I do this for two reasons. One, it's my way to give back to you, because although I love doing this podcast, I know that so many people have not an information problem, but an action problem, an implementation problem. And the other reason I do it, besides giving back, is because if you're one of those people, those high performance people, maybe you're an entrepreneur, maybe you're an accountant, maybe you're an attorney, medical doctor, and you are looking for help in this regard, you're looking for guidance to take your results to the next level, join the challenge. You'll get to experience my coaching firsthand and make an opinion based on your experience on whether you want to take it to the next level. So let's dive into today. Have you ever wondered if obesity is someone's fault, or being overweight is their fault? Or maybe you're overweight or obese and you're wondering, am I just a lazy person? Am I just failing here? Am I just a loser? You may use some pretty tough talk and you feel like you should just be able to get it together and lose the weight. Well, a lot of people, including many physicians, by the way, believe that obesity is a consequence of poor choices or a moral failing. But here's the reality. You're going to learn about how it is much more complex. Now, I'm going to do this for two reasons. We're going to focus on things that are outside of your control. Why? Because I want you to understand the game we're all playing here when we're trying to lose fat. Now, I went from 210 pounds at 24% body fat all the way down to 179 at about 8 to 10% body fat. I didn't have my body fat measured at that time. When I got to my leanest, probably sitting a few percent above that at the moment, but kind of on my way back down after caring for my father after the past month. But I have experienced this, is my point. And I'm also doing this because I want to show you what we can't control, but also how we deal with what we can't control, and also most importantly, what we can control. So we're going to dive into all that, what the science says about obesity, and more importantly, what you can do about it. And I'm going to also, of course, add my own experience because I disagree, quite frankly, with some of the mainstream medical characterizations of obesity. So before I get ahead of myself here, let's just lay some ground rules. So what is obesity? It is recognized as a chronic disease characterized by the accumulation of excess body fat that can have a negative impact on our physical, metabolic, and psychological health, in addition to affecting our quality of life. Now, I got that from, actually, I believe the Canadian, I forget the name, but it's not the CDC, it's the Canadian version of the CDC. I forget exactly what it is. But I really like the way they characterize that. Although I want to tell you something, and we'll get into this a bit more as the episode goes on. The mainstream model really kind of takes away responsibility a bit too much for my liking. And I don't want to dive too much into that because I want to get into the actual information. But I just want you to know that whenever you're dealing with a medical doctor or just mainstream medicine in general, and medical doctors who have less of an emphasis on lifestyle modification / behavior modification / education, and more on like, oh, well, let's treat obesity as a disease. Let's use drugs, let's use surgeries, which, by the way, I'm not opposed to, but it's just like, really, are we going to start with that? Is that a failing of the medical system? So we're not going to answer that question today because I have some doctors that will be coming on the show, which we'll get into that discussion with. And you'll get to hear, and these are doctors who are focusing on the lifestyle aspects of medicine, but also use drugs that treat obesity as well as recommend surgeries as well. So let's talk about, why does obesity occur? Well, as you might guess, there are many contributors to obesity. And as you'll learn today, there are some major ones, and it's multifactorial, and it's a bit complex and nuanced. But here's something you should also know. The obesity epidemic that is really sweeping the world as different parts of the world start to modernize is a relatively new phenomenon. It's only been present since the 1970s. And here's something that we preach on this show. We know that eating more calories than we burn is why people gain weight. And you may have heard that and said, it's not that simple. Well, it is that simple in terms of the mechanism, but it's much more complex to put it into to apply that calories in, calories out, or energy balance idea into our lives. Why? Because, I'll say it like this. Most scientists, what they believe is that there is what you would call a mismatch between our genes and the modern food environment that we find ourselves in. In other words, we have this hard wiring, which we're going to get into today, because some of the best information on weight loss, fat loss, obesity is coming from brain science, coming from neuroscience, coming from research into how the brain works. And so this is, I'll tell you, I don't know what most people think when they think I have a coaching program. They think I just write programs and talk about nutrition. I definitely do that, because you can't get results without it. And there's a lot of misinformation about that, by the way. But what I mostly focus on is the stuff that we're going to be talking about today, because most people love to just talk about the physiology and they geek out on hormones and stuff. And we'll be talking about some hormones today, in particular, one hormone that you must understand to start to understand your metabolism, understand why it's so hard to lose weight and why most people end up gaining it back. But at the root of it is we're just consuming a lot more food than we used to and moving less. But if it is that simple, why don't people just stop eating so much and get up off their butt more? And the truth is, many have tried, and many end up putting the weight back on. In fact, there's several studies. You probably, if you're a longtime listener, you've heard me quote several of them. Studies have shown that anywhere from 80 to 95% of the people, depending on who you're talking about, put the weight back on within like 3 to 7 years, depending on whose research you read. So let's talk about like what is going on there. And we're going to push aside the crash diets and the craziness and the completely like, okay, well, you were never going to keep that up to begin with type of stuff. We're going to talk about some more foundational principles when it comes to understanding obesity, putting on body fat, getting rid of body fat. And I want to start it off like this. Have you ever heard of a phenomenon called homeostasis? Now, if you remember from high school biology class, it's your body's ability to regulate its internal environment. So if you've ever, like more recently, I don't know about you, but I've had my temperature checked on my forehead more times than I think I've ever had my temperature taken in the pre-COVID part of my life ever. And it's somewhere around the 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. I forget what that is in Celsius. Forgive me, my Canadian and UK and Australian listeners and, European listeners. But homeostasis is how your body is able to keep that 98.6 degree range. It's also how your blood acidity stays the same. It's how so many processes in our body get regulated. Now, one other thing that is regulated is your weight. And substantial scientific evidence points to an area of your brain known as the hypothalamus as the center of the energy regulation master regulator of your body. I kind of messed that up. But basically, your hypothalamus is that thermostat, is that place in your brain that regulates your body weight. And not only does your hypothalamus regulate your body weight, but it influences how active you are. It influences hunger and satiety, and as well as being the switch that goes off when you start to lose weight and you start getting hungry, if that's ever happened to you. Now, let's say you were doing like my plan, right? Where I teach sensible weight loss. I don't teach everything. I get a wide range of people, but what I do there's not one person has ever said, whoa, this is super extreme, Ted. It is always less extreme than keto or paleo or intermittent fasting or any of the other methods people have used to lose weight, or even Weight Watchers. Because what I do is I just teach you about food. I teach you the missing things. Everybody thinks they know a lot about nutrition, but what I've found is that there's usually a big gap between what they think they know and what they actually know when it comes to losing body fat. So if you're on a program like what I put my coaching clients on, they lose fat, but some of them, and we'll talk about this, some of them deal with hunger a lot more than others. Now, you might ask, why would this hypothalamus thing in my brain want to stop me from losing weight? That doesn't make any sense. Well, it doesn't make sense in 2020, okay? But think about your ancestors. Think about, whether you believe humans have been around for 10,000 years or 2 million. Did they have DoorDash and Uber Eats? Did they have Publix and Whole Foods and Kroger's and Costco? No, of course not. They had, and before agriculture, the Neolithic age, I believe, they had to hunt and gather. And foraging for food was a physical challenge. So was hunting. Think about that. Have you ever been hunting before? I have not. But I see it's not easy, okay? And that's with modern hunting equipment like rifles. We're not talking about spears and bows and arrows, right? And I want you to, for a second, to close your eyes and think about it. Really put yourself there. Really think about your lifestyle now. Think about all the things that you do to get food, press some buttons, drive 10 minutes to find a parking space in front of the place where you're going to walk into so you don't have to walk that much. And then you go and you walk around the aisles a little bit, pick out what you want, and buy it, then go back and load it into the car and drive home, unload it, etc. Now think about this. Keep your eyes closed if you can, as long as you're not driving or, bench pressing with a lot of weight or running. Make sure you stop at intersections and whatnot. But think about what it must have been like. Think about your life 20 years ago. Think about what your parents' life must have been like. Think about what your grandparents' life must have been like. Think about before there were cars, there were horse and buggies. That was the turn of the century. Think about before that. I mean, it's no wonder why we're wired the way we're wired, because during times where there wasn't enough food, you can open your eyes now if you had them closed, brain systems needed to be developed, or some type of regulatory system, in our case, it's our brain, developed to increase hunger, lower energy expenditure, and increase your motivation and pleasure from any energy-dense foods. I mean, this makes total sense, because if our ancestors didn't have this, we would have all died from starvation every time there was a food shortage. And as soon as you get, how motivated are you to find food when you're hungry? And what are you most motivated to find? I mean, you start getting really edgy. You start getting the hangry, right? You don't care what it is. You just grab things and stuff it in your face, if you're like me. And if we didn't have these systems, we would have died from starvation every time that we were short on food. We needed some type of system in place to let us know, hey, listen, you're not eating enough. So your hunger is going to go up. You're not going to want to move around that much, but you're going to be highly motivated to find food. And you're going to be mostly motivated to find the most energy-dense foods you could find. So think about that system that has its origins in a world where people starve to death, and put it in modern society where easy access to cookies, chocolate bars, cakes, pies, potato chips, and more are literally a button push away with Instacart, right? And especially now, a lot of us are sitting more than ever, and we're getting our food. We're even more sedentary than we were before. And we're getting more things ordered from Amazon Fresh and DoorDash and Instacart than before. And even if you're going into the supermarket, it's still a struggle. So in the supermarket where I shop, it's called Publix. They put a display right in the front, and this display is full of cakes, pies, cookies, and cupcakes. And I can't tell you how many times I've been behind someone walking in, and I grab my card, they grab their cart, they're going in, I grab my card, I'm right behind them. They get stuck right at that table. And so as far as I can remember, most of the Publixes have them set up like that. I mean, we are more predictable than we'd like to believe when it comes to this particular area. So let's change gears a little bit. I hope you're starting to understand, it was hard to get food, and now it's easy to get food. And before we'd have to move a lot to get food, and now we have to move very little to get food. But the level of hunger that we feel, we feel like we're starving to death, but we're not. Most of us are overweight or obese. 2/3 of the population, if we're talking about America. So let's change gears a little bit. Back in 1994, a hormone was discovered that changed our understanding of body fat and weight as we know it. This hormone, something you've probably heard before, known as leptin, is secreted by your fat cells, and it's secreted in amounts relative to the amount of body fat you have. In other words, the more fat you have, the more leptin you release. The less fat you have, the less leptin you release. And what was also discovered was that when you lose weight, leptin goes down as well. This triggers hunger centers in your brain and decreases energy expenditure. In other words, it triggers your hypothalamus to start doing its thing to help you stay at the same weight, because it views weight loss as a threat to survival. So leptin is believed to help regulate body weight by acting like a thermostat. So in your house, You set the thermostat. Personally, I have my thermostat set for like 74 right now, 74 degrees Celsius. I'm sorry, Fahrenheit. Sorry, getting confused. And probably more like 29 degrees Celsius or something like that. So you set your thermostat, and every time the temperature drops below that set point, it triggers the air conditioner to come on, right? That's how it works. So think about weight loss like this. As you lose weight, your leptin level lowers. Leptin is kind of the temperature. And the lowering of leptin triggers your hypothalamus. Your hypothalamus goes, hey, we're losing weight. We got to do something here. This is dangerous. We might starve to death. And so you get hungry and what most people might call lazy, so that you regain the weight that you lose. And if you've ever wondered, like, hey, why am I so successful in some areas of my life? Let's say my career. I'm making money. I've got this degree. I'm running a business. I started a business. But in this other area, I really struggle with it. And I've coached so many high performers that have weight problems, whether being overweight or obese. And they feel like they're lazy. I've even had people tell me, you know what, I question the success in other areas of my life because I can't get this area handled. But the problem is with this area, it's more tricky, right? It's more tricky. It's not just about getting A's and doing your work and, all the things that people do to rise up in their career or to grow a successful business. It works differently. And so this is a lot of brain stuff going on. And one thing that's really important too is that this system doesn't work in reverse. In other words, it doesn't trigger anything if you start to put on a lot of fat, start to gain weight and put on a lot of fat. And you might think, whoa, that's a flaw in the programming. Well, in a way, right? It's not very adaptable. But think about your ancestors again. And remember, you're alive today because everyone in your lineage did not starve to death. Your parents, and so on and so forth, and so on and so forth. I mean, they all had to make it here today. And this is part of what helped them. So don't view your body, don't view this mechanism as a bad thing. It just doesn't work for this environment that's changed so rapidly. I mean, 20 years ago, smartphones didn't exist. I was rocking a Nokia. What about you? Right? I was on the internet, but I wasn't on it like now. Our situation has changed. And the jobs that are in most demand usually require us, like what I'm doing right now. I'm sitting on my butt in front of a computer, probably like how how you spend most of your workday. And so they never had to deal with what you're dealing with today and what I'm dealing with today. Think about that and appreciate that and just view it for what it is and try not to be so emotionally attached to it. Like, oh man, I'm broken. No, you're working fine. It's the environment has changed and our bodies aren't adapted for this environment. Why do you think walking desks are a thing? Why do you think Apple Watches and Fitbits that have to go off and bother you to move are a thing, right? So another important player here that we need to talk about is the reward system in your brain. We're not going to get into too much of the various neuroanatomy that are involved, but in addition to your hypothalamus, there are parts of your brain like the nucleus accumbens. And what else can I throw out there for you? That's the only other one that I remember right now. These are the parts of the brain that are involved with the reward, right? And you probably know the neurotransmitter dopamine. And this part of your brain is important for motivating and reinforcing your behavior. And this is partly what social media companies like Facebook kind of exploit. And it's also, by the way, what now I don't want to get too into conspiratorial thinking. Is it really exploitation or is it just making a product that really works, right? Making something that really works. Same thing with food companies. You think they don't know about this stuff? I mean, they hire scientists to create food. I mean, they also try to do healthy food too, and people won't buy it, but that's for another discussion. So, and I might even open that up during this conversation if it seems like I can squeeze it in and make it relevant. But here's the thing with this reward part of your brain. It can be disrupted by biological and environmental factors. So we'll talk about this in more detail in a bit, but stress levels, socioeconomic status, advertising, food environment, and more can disrupt this part of your brain that is linked to reward. And more specifically with food, advertising. I mean, have you ever been watching TV and then an advertisement comes on? I mean, I was in my dad's place. I'm in my own place now. But when I was in my dad's place, he had TV. And in between some of the shows, there would be advertisements. Man, I hate advertisements. And by the way, I'm a streamer. I can't stand advertisements. And streaming, I like it. I watch what I want when I want. And we can talk about that a little bit later. But I was watching TV and I was just blown away. I mean, there was some of the commercials were just stupid. And some of them were kind of funny. There was one who was like, breathe in the bacon and breathe out the bacon. Like making fun of mindfulness, but really marketing to people who, would think that's funny and probably in not the best shape when it comes to their body fat percentage or BMI. And think about the taste and smells. Shout out to Stan's Donuts, which is one of my clients. He likes the donuts there, but his wife wants him to go to this specific donut place and go get donuts because they're so delicious. And so she's got this sort of connection in her mind that Stan's Donuts are way more delicious than Dunkin' Donuts or any other donuts that you could buy, or Krispy Kreme donuts, or maybe you like Krispy Kreme. I had another client back in Miami who was a part investor in Krispy Kremes in South America. And he made very good money from it because there are a lot of people who love Krispy Kreme donuts. And so these concentrated, so think about all the advertising, think about all the new creations, these foods that we eat that have changed over time, that they've refined the recipe for, and how these concentrated ingredients train your brain to anticipate reward. And I want to talk about this idea of anticipation because here's a fun fact for you. Functional MRIs have shown that people with obesity have increased activity in their brain that drive anticipation for eating, but decreased activity in the areas of reward. I'm going to say that again. Functional MRIs, which is a form, I think everybody knows what an MRI is. It shows the physiology. It's a picture of what's going on. And these functional MRIs have shown that people with obesity have increased activity in their brain that drive the anticipation for eating, but decreased activity in the areas of reward. So what does that mean? It means that obese people, either there's a direct connection or correlation there, but people who are obese tend to have this situation where the motivation to eat the junky goodness that we know we shouldn't eat that much of is very high, but the actual satisfaction from it is low. Okay, so I want you to think about this. In fact, I'll don't think about it. I'll share a story that I hope will make this pretty obvious. So the other day, I like ice cream. Okay, and I was in the supermarket shopping, and I was like, you know what? Well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get, instead of ice cream, which has so many grams of fat in it, I'm going to get frozen yogurt. It's much lower calorie per serving, And it's pretty damn delicious. It still gives you that ice cream, or at least for me, it gives you that ice cream satisfaction, but without all the fat. And if you're new and don't realize that fat makes you fat, if you eat too many calories, well, now you know. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to buy this frozen yogurt, cookies and cream frozen yogurt from Publix, because it's better it's better serving for serving than ice cream. And the only issue was that they only sell the frozen yogurt in half-gallon containers. So I would have to buy, what I would usually get is a pint, or I've gotten mochis, which come in 6-unit packages. But I was like, you know what? I'm just going to moderate myself here. I'm going to show restraint, and I'm just going to portion the half-gallon of frozen yogurt so that I get the frozen yogurt instead of ice cream. And, you know, it's much better serving for serving. All I got to show is a little restraint, and I'm good. Fast forward to later on that night, not the next day, not a few days, but later on that night, I ate the whole entire half-gallon, 1,800 calories. Boom. That was what happened. I actually shared this story and showed my coaching clients just to let them know that I stay lean because of my skills and knowledge, but I make mistakes all the time, like thinking that I was going to be able to ration a half-gallon of ice cream, a half-gallon of frozen yogurt, because it makes so much sense cost-benefit wise. This is why I don't like cost-benefit analyses, because we're like, oh no, but it's only going to cost me, you know, and I wasn't thinking about the money. I was thinking about, all right, well, the calories, I'm going to get much more pleasure with less calories per serving. But the problem is I just ate the entire thing instead. So I would have been better off buying a smaller container, knowing that I was going to eat the whole thing. And we'll talk about this a bit later. But I'm usually able to show more restraint than what I showed in this particular situation. But because of the lockdown, because of the added stress from my dad really struggling with his health, and me having to step in and spend a lot of time, spend a lot of money, spend a lot of emotional energy to help him, I mean, I've been acting unusual, probably like you have. So let's get into this. What can we do, right? This episode is sponsored by Organifi. Do you want to know a secret that all my coaching clients follow? It's really simple, but powerful. Add vegetables into each meal. But let's be honest, most of us, including myself, don't eat the recommended servings of vegetables and fruits each day. So for those of us who are on the go or have trouble eating healthy, having a greens powder makes it easy to get your greens in every single day, no matter how busy you are. And that's why I use and recommend Organifi Green Juice, a superfood powder that you just add water to so that you can get your greens in even when you're on the go. The best thing about Organifi Green Juice is that it actually tastes great. But don't believe me, try it for yourself. And use the code TED20, that's capital TED, the number 20, at www.organifi.com. That's Organifi.com to receive 20% off your first order. But hurry, this is a limited time discount for Legendary Life listeners. Now, back to the episode. If we've got our hypothalamus, that when we start to lose weight, and I talked a little bit about this in the fact that in the episode where I talked about our metabolism and how when we lose weight, not only does a lower weight mean that we need less energy, less calories to run our bodies, but also that our metabolism, our metabolic rate actually slows. Well, what's responsible for it? Your hypothalamus. And not only is it that thing that we're working against, but we're also working against these reward centers of our brain that it seems to be like when I was eating that half gallon of frozen yogurt, I was highly motivated to eat the frozen yogurt. But with every I was just like, maybe I'll just have another spoonful. Maybe I'll just have another spoonful. Oh, I feel like I just need one more spoonful. I feel like I just need one more spoonful. But by the time what happened was that I ran out of spoonfuls. It never made me satiated. It never satisfied me. And I want to ask you, has that ever happened to you? And the answer is most likely, hell yes, and more than once recently, let alone your whole entire life, right? And what I want to tell you here is there is something that we can do. If you feel like you're listening to this and you feel like, yes, I know exactly what you're saying. I've experienced all of this. I know exactly what you mean. This is basically my life day in, day out. What can I do about it? So let's get into it. And the first thing I want to tell you is this: take control. Because guess what? This is number one. We're going to go into, let's see, I've got six ways to deal with this, right? Number one, take control. There are people who lose weight and keep it off. Don't buy so much into the statistics. Most people don't do it the right way. Don't do it in a sustainable way. But what are they doing? Well, people who, how should I say this? There's a third area of your brain that's really important for weight loss and keeping it off, and it's called your prefrontal cortex. You might have heard of it. It's called the executive system. It's basically the area of your brain that allows you to make good decisions, come up with better strategies, and restrain yourselves when you need to. Restrain yourself when you need to. And the executive function of your brain is involved in setting goals, planning, self-regulation. It's what allowed you to get your degree when you didn't like some of your professors and your friends wanted you to go out and have a good time, but you still knew that you needed to get good grades, you needed to turn in your homework and pass tests and stuff. You were able to set those goals, plan accordingly, and regulate your behavior and get to where you passed in school, hopefully with good grades, or you got your job or started your business. And so people who use this part of their brain effectively can also learn how to use it to focus on their goals and act on their values instead of their feelings. And it's really important to note this. There's some interesting evidence that shows that obesity can lower prefrontal cortex activity. So I want you to think about that for a second. And it's not 100% clear if it's only obesity. In fact, it's probably more of a correlation than necessarily a causation. And we're going to talk about this more. But it seems like obesity in and of itself can lower your prefrontal cortex activity. So if that's the case, that means if you're overweight or obese, or in particular obese, actually, not necessarily overweight, but obese, then you're already having a harder time setting goals, planning, regulating yourself. I want you to ask yourself, are you struggling with your body fat, or are you struggling with your body fat in addition to other things? Are you compulsively spending? Are you compulsively drinking? Are you drinking too much? Are you doing a lot of things you shouldn't be doing? I mean, not that, society is judging you, but you feel the effects and you're saying, you know what, this isn't what I should be doing. This is taking me away from what I want. I'm not happy. I'm not moving towards my goals, because obesity can even make that worse. And research has shown that successful restrained eaters can also be easily thrown off by stress, because stress lowers your prefrontal cortex activity as well, thus compounding the problem. And that brings us to number 2, which is manage your stress. Well, how do you do that? Well, that is a longer conversation than we can have today. But most people have experienced an increase in hunger or food cravings when they're in a stressful situation. In fact, what do you think I was doing? I'll tell you personally, when I was struggling with my dad, I've been at this for about a 6-week period with him. Every time that he was really in a bad state, I would go to food and I would start eating. Now, that's not usually my situation, but I just didn't have anything else going. So emotional eating, also called stress eating, is using food to make yourself feel better. In other words, you're not eating because you're hungry, but you're feeling bad. And why do we do this? Well, it comes back to brain chemistry again. You've probably heard of the opiate addiction being a major problem in America. Well, certain foods act on our internal opioid system, the same system that opiate drugs work on. Now, I'm not an expert when it comes to this. I'm just starting to understand it myself. And I'm going to have Stephan Guyenet, author of The Hungry Brain, back on the show to dive into this even more. And it's much more complicated than this, but dopamine seems to motivate you to seek out food and eat food, and naturally produced opioids make us feel a little bit better when we eat them. But then we have trouble because all of a sudden you find yourself not being satisfied, right? So you feel good while you're eating it. You get the pleasure. You're motivated to eat it. You get the pleasure with every mouthful. Right? I'm thinking about that half gallon of cookies and cream ice cream. But I didn't get I never got to that satiety, that fulfilled or satisfied feeling. And I'll tell you this, again, how to combat stress is a much longer conversation, but the biggest stresses in most people's lives that I talk to are relationships. How is your relationship? How is your relationship with your partner, your husband, your wife, your girlfriend, your boyfriend? Are you communicating regularly? Are you having sex regularly if you're both interested in sex? Are you spending time together? Do you have a date night? Do you need counseling or even therapy? Should you even be with that person? Because unless you address those things, you're not going to solve the root problem. Now, again, you don't necessarily have to solve the root problem to solve the overeating thing, but it's something that you need to take steps towards so it's less of a stress. Another source of stress is finances, or let's not say finances, but like finances in career. Now, if you're struggling financially, maybe you shouldn't even be listening to this. Maybe you should go figure out how to get your shit straight with your finances. And listen, I've been broke, I've been struggling, I've been in a lot of debt with credit cards and student loans and other things. And when I got out of that living month to month world I was living in, all the stress disappeared, or not all my stress, but that part of my life became much less stressful. Now, for those of you who have great careers, but you're making money, but you're spending all the money because you're not happy with your career, you feel like, yeah, it's a reliable career and I'm making money doing it. I'm making good money doing it, but I'm not happy doing it. I don't feel like it's, I had a conversation with a client today. He's crushing it, but he's working for someone else and feels like he should be an entrepreneur. If he doesn't take, and this isn't me talking to him about this isn't society telling him, hey, you shouldn't be happy working for someone else. You should be an entrepreneur. This is him. This is the internal pressure because he feels like he's not following his path. And I want to ask you, are you following your path? Because if you aren't, if you're playing small, if you're settling, even though you're making money, and a lot of people think you have your shit together, but you and I both know that you're not happy with what's going on, then that's something that needs to be addressed. And so let's move on from that because we could just keep talking about that. But those are the big issues. I'll say one more thing about stress, though. Another thing that people said they were super stressed about, at least in 2019, I believe, was the political situation of the country. Damn it, people, cast your fucking vote and then go move on with your life. Or go play in politics, but stop stressing out over stuff that you don't have that much control over. Okay? Do what you need to do, then get back on track, but don't get stressed about something you just can't control. Right? I mean, of course, we're all human. We all feel like, oh man, I really wish I could do something about that. In fact, I struggle. I really wish I could help more people, but I can only shine the light from my lighthouse as brightly and as well as I can and as far as I can. But it's up to you to be, not drunk at the helm of your ship because you're probably going to crash on the rocks. And I've had to learn how to detach from that. So I haven't been so attached to politics, but I've been more attached to that. And I've had to learn how to let go. And so that's the only other thing I would talk about, especially because it's election year in the United States. And for those of you who aren't American, you're Canadian or from the UK, you're watching, you're like, let's see what's on America. Our favorite reality show. What's happening this week on America? Right? That's what a friend of mine from the UK was telling me. So the next thing you can do is get adequate sleep. Why? Because we know that when you have some issues with your sleep, that first of all, sleep loss is connected to obesity, right? Sleep loss raises the risk of obesity. And previous studies have shown that sleep loss results in higher level of the hormone ghrelin, which is a hormone we haven't talked about today, but ghrelin is that hormone that's responsible for the grumbling in your stomach when you're hungry, and also a lower level of leptin. So if you're losing weight and you're having trouble sleeping, you're having another issue, right? You're compounding your problem. And another thing is that sleep loss activates the same system that the marijuana munchies activate. The system known as the endocannabinoid system in your brain. So when you don't get enough sleep, blood levels of a natural marijuana-like chemical known as endocannabinoid 2-arachidinylglycerol, or simply 2-AG, because I probably ruined that pronunciation, it makes you enjoy eating more, and particularly not kale salads and superfood shakes, but the pleasure gained from sweeter, salty, or high-fat snacks or hyper-palatable foods. So that's another thing if you're short on sleep. The other thing is you have to learn how to master your hunger. Now, in my coaching group, I teach a lot about this, but even in the 7-day challenge, I start to teach people about foods that help with satiety more than others. And guess what? Carbs aren't the issue. It's something called hyperpalatable foods, which is usually, think about it, ice cream. It's a combination of fat and carbs. Even the frozen yogurt, combination of carbs and fat. Donuts, cake, chocolate bars, potato chips, ice cream, I already mentioned French fries, cookies, popcorn, and butter. All a mixture of carbs and fat, and also highly refined. Another thing is daily exercise. And less important, I'll tell you, is daily exercise for burning calories as much as it is for daily exercise to make you feel good. So let me tell you something. This is really about feeling good. And the better you feel, the less struggle you will have with losing weight. But most people aren't feeling very good. And exercise is just one of those things. It's basic upkeep for your body. It's like we don't get surprised when we get cavities when we eat a lot of sugar, or I should say, just don't brush our teeth. But yet somehow we get surprised when we don't feel good and we don't have healthy habits in place, habits that help us feel good. You feel good from being proactive about it. You don't naturally feel good. Maybe when you're when you're going through, as you're a young child, going through puberty, and maybe slightly after you've gone through puberty, but guess what? You're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. You're going to have to work to feel good. And if you're not willing to do the work, then just suffer, right? It's just as simple as that, okay? I don't know what to tell you here, because that's like saying, I want to drive my car, but I don't want to change the oil. It's so inconvenient to change the oil. Well, guess what? You're going to end up like I did when I was 23, and I was too busy to change the oil until my car, that first car I ever bought for like $2,200 blew up and created a huge crisis for me. So learn that, doing something every day to make you feel good. Now I'm saying daily exercise because it just has so many benefits, but meditation, writing in a gratitude journal, have a recipe to help yourself feel good. And the last thing is get support. So many people try to do this on their own. And I want to tell you this. There was a study titled The Spread of Obesity in Large Social Networks over 32 years that looked into how people in our lives influenced a number of factors, including obesity. And what the researchers found was your risk of obesity is 45% higher if you have obese friends. So Bob and Karen are obese. Your friends, Bob and Karen, you have a 45% chance of being obese. Let's say Bob and Karen are normal weight, but Bob and Karen have Frank and Alexandra who are obese. Well, your risk of knowing Bob and Karen who have some obese friends, your risk is 25% higher. And even if your friends, someone you probably don't even know are obese, your risk of obesity is 10% higher. It's crazy, right? We think we're so independent, especially us Americans. We think we're individuals. I ain't gonna wear a mask. Sorry, couldn't help myself. But I'm American. America. That's how Americans greet each other. For those of you who are from other countries, we just go and see each other and we're like, America. That's just what we say to each other. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. Some cheesy humor for you. But this brings up some ideas like Jim Rohn said, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Tony Robbins has said, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. And what I want to tell you is this. Think about your friends right now. Think about your partner. Think about the people who are in your life. Think about the stresses they have in their life. Think about the things that they're struggling with. Do they have it together? Or are they really struggling? Are they kind of a mess? And we're all kind of a mess. I mean, I'm kind of a mess. My business is kind of a mess, but I make it work and I'm happy with it. And my clients are happy and they get great results. Even though, is it perfect? No, because perfection isn't a real thing. It's an idea, not an actual thing. But you've got to be honest with yourself. Like, how much are the people around you lifting you up, or are they dragging you down? And how are you lifting people up, or are you dragging people down? That's something really important questions to ask. And I'll tell you, if you're struggling with this area and you've been trying to do it, I talk to so many people on the breakthrough calls, and probably about half the people I talk to sign up, half the people don't. And of course, some people aren't qualified, right? Because if you've got I'll be straight with you. If you've got so many stresses in your life, if your life is an absolute mess, but you think if throwing money at me to come in my coaching problem, throwing money at me is going to help you solve your life, it's not. You have to really ask yourself, and I ask clients on the breakthrough calls, it's like, I ask them about the stresses in their life, where it's coming from, how stressed they are. And if they're like, oh man, my life I'm living on the edge financially, in my relationships, everywhere. Nobody's ever said that to me, by the way, but I'm just saying, if I get that vibe, I don't invite them in because I don't think they can handle. I think they need to probably start somewhere else. You need to identify the root cause of your stresses, and then start to take steps in the right way. And I always ask people, why do you think that you should work with me instead of someone to help you get out of debt, or someone to help you make more money, or someone to help you, a career coach or a marriage counselor? I always ask that. And I'll tell you this too, just to be honest, like some people say, no, I've really thought about this and I'm in a good place in my life. I've actually had a person start crying with me, and she said, you know what? I want you to understand my husband's super supportive. I know I'm crying right now, but I really want to take action here. I really want to make this change in my life. And I know I sound a little, out of it, but I can assure you I'm in a really good place and I'm ready to tackle this. And you know what? She lost 40 pounds in my program. And if you're listening, Kim, shout out to you. You are amazing. But then some people, they tell me that they're ready, and then it's very clear that they're not, right? Very clear that they're not. So these are the types of things that we need to think about. Where do we need to step up? Where do we need help in our life? Who is around us that is either dragging us down or lifting us up? And are we the ones that are dragging people down? And what do we need to do in our lives so that we can be a force for positivity and growth and positive impact? I don't know, whatever you want to say. Are you an asset or a liability? And are the people in your life assets or liabilities? One of the big conversations I've had with my dad is based on this. Now, I didn't say he was a liability, but in so many words, I did. I didn't say, Dad, I've run a risk assessment on you and you're clearly a liability. I didn't say it like that, but I had an honest conversation with him. I'm like, man, every time you freak out and you have these things and you're not communicating well and you're too agitated, it drags me down. And when I'm dragged down, I can't do my job well. And if I can't do my job well, I can't make the money to help you. And I really made it about him and not about me, and just put it in those terms. And he started to improve his behavior. So we've got to really think about the people in our lives, which is arguably the most important thing we can ever have. Who we let into our lives, who we keep in our lives, and who we cut out of our lives, or at least minimize in our lives. Some of you, we can't cut out it's not like, my dad isn't such a horrible he's not a horrible person, right? So I would never cut listen, man, you're out, right? I'm never talking to you again. But I would say, listen, I've got to limit my contact with you because every time I have to come over and put out your fires, I'm not the fire department. I'm not equipped or skilled in this way. I had to have that talk. And then he's been so much better. And it's taken a couple of talks, not just one, by the way. So I'm saying that for you to know that, if you feel a bit out of control and you feel like some of the people in your life are dragging you down, that you can have conversations with them. You gotta show love first and tell them, like some of the clients that I've talked to who've had some relationship problems, the first thing I ask is, do you know whether you want to really be with this person? And you'd be surprised. They have all these complaints about the person they're with. I'm no relationship counselor, but I deal with these things in the context of okay, well, how do we get you in shape? What are the things that are holding you back from reaching the next level of your life, right? Because it's not just weight loss or fat loss coaching. It's really about leveling up your life, moving to the next level in your life. That's what I'm really passionate about. And it involves looking better naked, but if I didn't include that part, I wouldn't be happy with what I do, quite frankly. So, do you want to be with this person? And you'd be surprised how many people say, absolutely, they're a hell yes for me. I'm like, boom, all right, that's easy. So it's then just a communication thing and maybe getting some counseling or therapy. So I want to say this too. If you're a high performer, you have a lot of things handled in your life, but you know that getting in shape would take you to the next level, then you're an ideal client for me. And you should probably hire me, right? I don't know for sure that I can help you, but if you've resonated with me, if you've been listening to this podcast, if you've resonated with it, and you don't want to do the challenge, you want to just skip that and just start to get results, go to legendarylifepodcast.com/apply and apply for a breakthrough call. And we'll figure out if what I do is right for you and if you're a good fit for me as well, because we'll have to work together. And, again, what I said earlier, we got to be mindful of who we let in our lives. I don't just work with anybody. And nor should you just work with anybody, even if they have a good reputation. You've got to make sure it's a good fit. It's just as simple as that. Makes sense, right? Well, listen, that's all I've got. Hope you enjoyed this. Hope this shines some light on some of the struggles that you're having with fat loss, with obesity, with being overweight, with some of the negative feelings that you may have been feeling, some of the beating ourselves up. Oh gosh, I should be better than this. I should get my act together. I'm a parent, I kill it in business, but I'm fat and I hate myself for it. Well, don't hate yourself for it, right? There's all these things working against you. And I didn't talk about this, but the misinformation and the bad strategies that are out there don't help either. All right, so be compassionate with yourself, but definitely find a successful strategy, something that is more about lifestyle change, something that helps you with all these areas in your life. And that is really where the sustainability is. It's improving your life, improving your lifestyle. And that's the way you get to the next level. That's the way you lose the weight and keep it off for good. Hope you enjoyed this today. Can't wait for Friday. Speak to you then, and have a great one.